All right, we're going to get started, everybody. Yeah, can you hear me? All right, for the sake of time, we're going to get started. I know some of you guys have a class at 11. So, Javar, if you can have a seat, please. Thanks. There'll be time after for those who can linger to hang out, to ask questions, interact with our guests. So happy Monday, everybody. Hope you've had a good weekend and enjoyed the fallish weather. Fall, it's a reminder that summer is over and fall is here. I'm all right with. So it's good seeing all of you. It's good to see some guests, new faces, both here in the chapel and online. Grateful for your time and attention. And this is going to be a really important conversation this morning. So we're glad you're here for it. I'm grateful for our guests to be here. I just want to acknowledge and let you all know that there are some heavy things going on now with our students. One of our Campolo scholars is in surgery this morning, and so we'll be praying for her, mindful of her, and keeping an eye on how things go with that. She really wanted to be here for this, so just even without knowing all the details, you can keep one another in prayer. That's what the beauty of this cohort model is that you are in this together with others, and you can be mindful of both your own journey and that of the others, and keep each other in prayer. We are for you. Next weekend is homecoming. I know you're about to go into fall 3 days, and I hope you enjoy all that. But want to bring to your attention that beginning next a week from this Wednesday is the beginning of homecoming. On Wednesday evening, we're going to be honoring our first Campolo Scholar alumni of the year. So that's going to be a nice dinner and celebration of that student. We'll keep that secret. And there will be I think we're going to have an open house in our office on Friday. So we'll get some more details about that. We'll have some refreshments. For those of you who haven't seen the new office space and how we've revitalized or renovated that, how we're trying to turn it into a place where you can come and meet with us, but also meet with each other, share a meal, study. Somebody in the cohort is going to use it in the evenings for a Bible study. So we're hoping that it's something that each of you can make use of. And but it'll be a chance to come check it out. And then there will be a barbecue for all of you. I mean, you can go to different barbecues, but there'll be one that's geared for the Campolo scholars. Yeah.
I just want to say that me and Kristen will be cheering at the homecoming game, and we'll be playing it if everyone wants to.
There's a home football game.
Yes,
on Friday at 4. Have to check that out. And you've been cleared from concussion? No.
Hopefully fine.
So if this is the NFL, then you'd already been cleared.
Yeah.
This is a sign that they care about you, that they're waiting until you're. So there's a lot of good stuff happening. And of course, also on Friday at 10 a.m. next Friday, since we don't have a forum on Monday because of fall 3 days, a friend of the ministry, a friend of the Campolos, an alum of Eastern, Reverend Dr. Bishop Don Hilliard will be speaking at the Windows on the World next Friday at 10 a.m. In McGinnis Auditorium. And I would encourage you to go to that in lieu of our meetings. We don't have a meeting on Monday. So that is on the schedule of events that we'd like you to be at. Okay, So let's turn our attention to our guests. I just want to briefly introduce Ray, who is a friend of Eastern. He's an alum of Eastern. He's known the Campolos for a long time, took classes with Tony while a student here. You worship at Wayne Central Baptist?
Yes.
In Wayne? Right, so he's a member of a local congregation. It's a wonderful church here in Wayne, Central Baptist Church. And he and his wife have been serving in ministry, in international ministry through American Baptist Churches USA for quite a long time. And so international ministry, cross-cultural ministry, a lot of work at the southern border. And I think you're going to be talking about borders and walls and how we transcend those in Christian ministry. But I've always appreciated your witness and have enjoyed hearing you speak and share about your work and your ministry before. And so I'm delighted that you can be with us today to share with our students and others in the Eastern and Palmer community that are with us. So please join me in welcoming Ray Schellinger. Thanks.
Well, it's awesome to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you. Also with you playing the home game. It's great to see you online too. And so just to to say a little bit more about where I've been. So since 1995, my wife and I have been working with International Ministries, beginning first in Nicaragua, then in Mexico. The last 15 years of those years overseas were in Tijuana, which is a really interesting place. We got there just before 9/11, a couple of months before 9/11 hit, and it was a drastic change in the border and the attitudes about border. And since then, I think we've seen a lot of other changes with what I think fear-driven. We saw this awful attack, and suddenly we feel like we need to circle the wagons. We need to close ourselves in. So we started building a much bigger wall. We started doing a lot of other things to kind of, to protect our borders. Of course, nobody came across the Mexican border, and though they did come across the Canada border, we didn't see the same kind of mobilization or militarization of the border on the northern side. But all that has had tremendous effects on the people and that live there and who are our closest neighbors. And that's been kind of a difficult thing to watch over the years, the even greater changes that have been happening there. And some of those changes in policy and some of it, the physical construction of a wall. And I say that because as a Christian minister, I think all of us as Christians, need to think about how it is that we become bridges in the world between, there's so many reasons that we find to exclude, to hate, to have prejudices. We are so afraid of what we don't know so often. And that makes it so much more difficult to know, to find out, to cross, the barriers that this world has. But I think as Christians, we really need to strive to figure out how to do that. That's I think, our number one responsibility is to understand what it means to love our neighbors and make that love real in this world. And it gets tougher and tougher. Even as we become more multicultural as a country, I think sometimes, particularly as people see their communities changing, they grow more afraid. And so the same churches that once sent us out to, as Christian servants to go around the world and sharing the love of Christ with our brothers and sisters without any respect for where they come from, how they got there. The same churches that have done that historically, I think, are having a much harder time figuring out how to do that in their own communities. And so I want to, applaud those churches that keep striving to do it. At the same time, to encourage those who are, continuing to build walls to find ways in which they can break past those differences. So I want to share with you a couple of the stories of people that I've met and come across, and also share with you some of the boundaries that they've come across when they've tried to come to our country, to the US. Now, I do work with with refugee issues around the world. I'm working with displaced peoples and partnering with ministries from places, in Europe, now working with a lot of Ukrainians who have had to flee, with, in Lebanon, where more than a quarter of the population are refugees, in places like Malaysia and Bangladesh, where in Thailand, where refugees from Myanmar have had to flee. So I'm working in those contexts and seeing how people are overcoming those barriers and how they're creating ministries. And that just makes it sometimes so much harder when I see so many attitudes changing in the US that are hardening against anybody else. And how many times do you see, people talk about immigration and they're coming to steal our jobs, and a lot of other rhetoric that loses sight of the people we're talking about. And an election was just decided in Italy yesterday from a candidate who is fascist or potentially fascist and very anti-immigration. So we're seeing some of those same attitudes crop up all over the place. But I'm going to start with this, one of the stories. 2.5 years ago, I was walking down a highway in Colombia. I was finishing my 4th of 5 days on the migrant route that Venezuelan migrants are taking as they leave Venezuela, heading south down into Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Argentina, wherever they might get to, in hopes of finding life. Because I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Venezuelan economy has completely crumbled. People are not able to feed their families, to buy medicine, to get any of the basic needs they have. And about 6.8 million Venezuelans have now fled in the last 5 years. And they're walking to wherever they can get to. They're walking in hopes of finding a job, being able to maybe send back whatever they can earn, so that whatever family they had to leave back in Venezuela, they can help take care of. But it's almost impossible, because now it's almost 7 million Venezuelan migrants spread throughout South America. They're finding it harder and harder to find any jobs or any opportunity at all. And so those were the people that I was trying to get to know and understand and hear their stories. And so I'm walking down this road, getting to the end of my 4th day, and every single day I've been walking with people, men, women, families, small children, people pushing strollers, people pushing wheelchairs, people carrying people on their backs, walking thousands of miles to get across the country, to get down to where they might find work. And as I'm coming into where I was going to stop for the end of the day and set up my tent, a rainstorm comes in and it starts pouring down rain as hard as it could. So I ducked into a little truck stop roadside cafe, and I tried to get dry. I sat down, ordered something to eat, and then I walked across to I ordered some food, then I walked across real quick to a motel, which is across the street, thinking, okay, I'm not going to set up my tent tonight. I'm just going to get a room. $7, it sounds like a pretty good deal. And I checked in. I was the first person there at this little truck stop motel. Checked in, no problem. They were, happy to have a client, a customer. And I got my room key, went back across to get my meal, started eating. And as I'm finishing up my meal, I see this couple, these 2 kids, a man and a woman, jump off the back of a truck that was coming into the truck stop. And they were soaking wet. They'd been traveling in the back. They had a couple backpacks, everything they own on their backs. And they jump off the truck and they're running to find where they can get cover. And they come into this cafe where I am, and they wouldn't let them in because they didn't have any money to buy anything. And they said, no, you can't eat it here. How about if we stay in the awning? No, please, you're going to scare our customers away, please. And so I ran out to them and said, well, hey, maybe I can get you something to eat, and they'll let you in that way. And they did, begrudgingly. And asked them where they were headed. And they said, well, we're hoping to catch another truck, but we aren't sure if we'll catch one tonight. And the rainstorm is so bad. What can we do? And I said, well, there's a motel across the street. I'll buy a room for you tonight. And hopefully, you guys can get dry and you can start again tomorrow. They said, oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And so I splurged another $7, walked across the street with them. And at that point, maybe 2 or 3 more trucks had come in, gotten rooms. But the place was practically empty. I go up to the counter. There's a young woman that, who checked me in a little bit ago before, so nice to me. She sees them, they're asking for the room, the money I just gave her. And she says, I'm sorry, we don't have any more room, no space. And I said, well, we have money to pay for it. She said, no, I'm sorry, you're not welcome here. And I was a little perplexed, and I asked, well, there are lots of rooms available. She said, nope, we don't have anything more available. But are they reserved? Yep, they're all reserved. I said, are you sure? And she said, absolutely, because we don't rent to these dogs. And that was the attitude. We don't allow dogs in our hotel. And she was turning them away. And so I said, well, here's a solution. I've got my tent. Here, take my key. You got my room. And the woman said, no, I can't allow that. And I said, well, it's my room. I'm going to do with it what I want. And so I gave them the key, and then she begrudgingly said, okay, I have another room here in the back, but nothing works. The fan doesn't work, air conditioning doesn't work, the lights don't work, but if you don't mind taking that. And they said, yeah, we'll take it. Take it. And she let them have that. They had a good night's rest for the first time in a while. The next morning, I walked with them again, got some breakfast, and started on the highway. We were quickly joined by 15 or 20 other people, all walking, and I'm walking along and listening to their stories. But Hector and Rospelis, this young couple, 19 and 21 years of age, she was pregnant, didn't yet know it at that moment, refused a room at the inn. Now walking the 20 miles it's going to take me to get to where my final destination was going to be, at a ministry helping Venezuelan migrants like this. And so, we're walking along and I'm listening to their story. And it turns out Rospelis had to quit her last semester. She's missing one semester at school. She was going to graduate at 20 years of age as an agro engineer. Brilliant young woman. But she had to quit school because there was no way for them to continue. Hector had a job before as a driver for the state's governor. He had a CDL license. He was driving trucks. He could drive anything. And yet they lost his job because government lost funding, and that disappeared, and they had nothing. But here are two people with lots of ability. It also turns out that Rospelis was the first chair violinist in her state orchestra. And Venezuela has incredible music. She is an amazing violinist. She also had to give up her violin because that was the only way they could make their journey, to sell everything, the single thing they had. And here they were walking. The people I was walking with that day said it felt like the first day of fresh air in many, many months. Most of them had been walking for 6 to 8 weeks to get to where they had gone. They had so much further they had to go. But everywhere they went, they're treated like dogs. They're worse than dogs. We love our dogs more than better than these people, human beings are being treated. And yet that's what's waiting for them. Everywhere they go, they can't find water. Nobody will, let them even fill up from their hose outside or anything like that. It's so tough, and they have nothing. And their currency, Venezuelan currency, is worth nothing. They're just walking and walking and walking. And if you go down to the streets of Ecuador or Colombia, the highways, you will see thousands of people walking on the roads. That day, we had a party. We climbed mango trees. We everybody showered underneath a waterfall. We just enjoyed a great time talking. We got to this ministry. I was able to get some new shoes for a couple people who had blisters so bad you could see the raw spots all over their feet. We got medical attention for them. We got some food. We got them some rest. And then I had to say goodbye, and they had to continue their journeys. Most of them have kept in touch with me. Most of the hundreds of people I met that week in Venezuela are still writing to me on WhatsApp and letting me know where they are, but none of them have anywhere to go. And that's why we're seeing more and more Venezuelans now make the journey back north. And the most dangerous place to cross is through Central America, especially from Colombia to Panama, and then north up to our border. And most of these people have been on the road for months. This is the latest in a wave of asylum seekers we're seeing at the border. We didn't used to see asylum seekers come like this. It used to be people, coming to the border to cross to try to find work in the US. They were actually invited in many cases to work. They didn't have a legal way to do it, but they had jobs waiting for them when they got here. But now we're seeing people who are escaping severe poverty, starvation, and violence in ways that are just astounding. One of the women I met in Tijuana a couple of years ago had fled El Salvador because the gangs took her oldest son when she refused to allow him to join the gang. They were forcing him to, and she wouldn't allow him, and he refused. And so they took him and they cut him into pieces and they cooked his body and they brought it back to her and made her eat from her own son's flesh. That's what people are escaping. Those are some of the stories that you hear if you walk the roads or you go into the shelters. You begin ministering with people who are on the move. We've seen tens of thousands of Central Americans come to the border. We're now seeing lots of Nicaraguans who we hadn't seen before, who are escaping the political violence that's happening in Nicaragua and a severe economic downturn. We're seeing the first group we began seeing in 2015, 2016 were Haitians. 50,000 Haitians were working in Brazil after the earthquake. Brazil invited them in to work for the World Cup venue and the Olympic venues that they had to build and put together and provide all the services for. 50,000 Haitians were invited. And then as soon as those events were over and Brazil didn't need them anymore, they said, well, the same day, all of your work permits are canceled and you have to leave. And so 50,000 people started making their way up to the border, to the US. They heard that if they could get to the US, they'd get temporary protected status, they'd be able to stay. Wasn't true. Most of them who arrived were deported within weeks. But still, we saw this huge line of people coming north. Then, one after another of these movements of people. Cameroonians. Do you know that there's a civil war going on in Cameroon? Anglophiles are being killed by the Francophiles who control government, the French-speaking against the English-speaking Cameroonians. And we're seeing thousands and thousands of Cameroonians. And we see them, believe it or not, getting to Mexico, coming north. They fly to places like Ecuador and then walk. Or they stow away on container ships. I've met hundreds of people that have done exactly that and then walk. Can you imagine walking across Central America? Cartel controlled areas, it's unfathomable, but that's what people have to do to try to survive. So these are the stories, Hector and Rosbelis and others. Dennis, a Russian man who was in my home until tomorrow. After 2 years, he's been living with us. He was part of Team Navalny, was being persecuted by the government. He was about to be arrested, where he probably would have died in prison. He fled just before that. He had all of his assets frozen. He was able to get a flight to Mexico and then get up to the border. And 3.5 years later, he now finally has working permits. It's going to take another 2 years before he knows if he wins his asylum or not. Russians, believe it or not, have made their way through Mexico. We see everyone. I've seen more than 50 different nationalities there. And they're all incredible, amazing, and heartbreaking stories. And every single one of them is a human being. And single one of them deserves to be heard, deserves to be treated as a human being. But unfortunately, what is happening now is we're seeing more and more people coming. We've lost sight of the humanity in those that are right in front of us. We've lost sight that this is a valuable, incredible child of God. We talk about the body of Christ and how important it is to build one another up. Well, that body of Christ extends beyond any of our human-made borders, right? These are all our fellow brothers and sisters. We need to figure out how to make sure that when we think about the body that we want to help create, that we are including them as well. And we have to think about policies that make sense for them too, that at least people will be heard. I want to tell you a little bit about what happens when you come up to the border, and that process, what that's like, and why I want to hope to see how we might be able to change things. And one of those is that, back in 2015, 16, when the Haitians started coming, we put in a metering process where you had to, give your name when you got to the border. And then within 6 to 8 months, your number would be called, and then you could come apply. Well, that metering system hadn't been there before, but when we started seeing these larger numbers of people coming, we actually created something that's against the law. We're forcing people to wait in Mexico for their number to come up. And that wait became longer and longer as that line got bigger. And they started taking 50 people a day at the border at the most, at each border crossing. And then they started taking that down. Some days it was 0, some days it was 5, some days it was 10, 15, 25 max. So if you have a number that's 3,000, 4,000, people later, then it's going to take a long time before your number's up. But then in the last administration, we created a program called Zero Tolerance, where if people tried to cross with their children, they would be charged with crimes for human trafficking, taking your own child across the border. And that's where family separations came in. We deported the parents, we put the children into the health and human services, and ultimately into foster care systems. And sometimes parents lost their rights completely. They were deported and they have no way to get back together again. And that's been a huge mess trying to straighten that out. And then we had MPP, Migrant Protection Protocol. This is the most Orwellian term you're ever going to hear, because it had nothing to do with protecting migrants. It was all to do about making people wait and making people lose their asylum cases. So you sent people across the border. So you came to the border to ask for asylum, and then you were immediately sent back into Mexico and told to come for a later appointment. And usually there were 6 or 7 appointments before you actually had your chance to actually present your case to apply for asylum. And in that time, most people couldn't wait, because if you're in a country where you have no legal rights, you have no way to work, what are you going to do for a year while you're waiting through MPP? And for that reason, less than 2% of asylum seekers in the MPP program ever got asylum. That program was all about making it impossible for us to offer asylum to these people that are coming. In fact, for most of the last, for most of the years of that administration, we saw almost, the numbers plummeting of asylum seekers and refugees too, another program that was completely decimated. From 130,000 refugees we were admitting a year to less than 5,000. Refugees escaping violence, internationally recognized. So MPP, send them all back in Mexico, make them wait there, and hopefully they will lose the opportunity, because they can't wait there, and they're going to miss an appointment. Once that happens, their case is over. And then we saw Title 42, which is just now a couple months ago been stopped. Title 42 was for health reasons because of the COVID pandemic. We said we're not going to take anybody at all, and if you come to the border, we're just going to return you. And that's why, for the last 4 years, we see a backlog of several 100,000 people waiting at the border. And just now, people are finally able to come and begin to be able to cross the border to ask for asylum. And if you get a sponsor in the US, you can be released into the US while you wait, but you have no right to work, and you have to wait for several years. So it takes a huge program. It takes a community of programs to be able to put together the resources that are needed in order to help our neighbors wait it out until they can apply for asylum. At the same time, we need workers faster, more than we ever have in our economy, but none of them are able to work until their asylum cases are adjudicated. And so it's just this crazy system. And now to top it off, we're taking people that are coming across, waiting to figure out where they can go, and we're putting them on buses and shipping them somewhere else. We're putting them on airplanes and sending them to Martha's Vineyard. It's crazy. It's crazy. But these are the answers we as a society have come up with. As a government, and local and national government, our policies are all about trying to exclude as many people and reject. And in the midst of that, we as Christians, I think, need to figure out a way, first of all, to challenge those policies, but also to see where it is in the midst of all that we can create an opportunity for people to find home again.